Good morning, everyone. My name is MightyStream, and I'm going to do your May the 13th Spiritual Principle a Day in a Meditation. If you need to reach me, feel free to do so at recoveryofhope21@gmail.com. The title of the meditation for today is Flexibility in Relationships. The flexibility that relationships require comes more easily to us when we are practicing principles in our lives. That comes from the Living Clean Book, Chapter 5, Romantic Relationships, The Courage to Trust. Most of us are not wired for flexibility. Letting go of control just isn't in our nature. We struggle with rigid expectations of how people should behave, so we fight or flee when things don't go our way. Others of us live with minimal boundaries. We put up with anything to avoid conflict, pain, and rejection. Thankfully, we have a program based on spiritual principles and relationships with NA members to help teach us how to live by them. By being real with each other in NA, we support each other in becoming less rigid. We learn to handle the truth. Working with a sponsor helps us to trust and to ask for what we need. Serving in a home group and beyond provides us with opportunities to compromise, speak up for ourselves, and respect boundaries. We become more flexible as we apply other principles too. Our emotional muscles get more limber with open mindedness, willingness, honesty, empathy, sometimes tolerance, if that's all we've got. Working the steps and practicing principles helps us to let go of the illusion of control. Our lives improve as we figure out who we are and who we're not. We come to understand the disease and trust our higher power. We allow people to be who they are because we're learning to be okay with ourselves. Getting to know someone on a deeper level is easier when we know ourselves. As we let go of self centered patterns of gratification, being cooperative and accommodating allows us to be equal partners in our relationships. Many of us once lived by a policy of my way or the highway. By practicing the principles in our program, we gain the flexibility to be able to say, your way? Sure, let's try it out. Relating well with others involves some give and take. I will draw on my NA experience to practice flexibility in all of my relationships. Let's take a moment of silence, followed by the wee version of the Serenity Prayer. Moment of silence now. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things that we cannot change, the courage to change things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Just for today, please and thank you. Thank you for that moment of silence. Yeah, that was one that I just rushed through. However, it's not my intention. Sometimes I think what happens is that my mind is focused on the information. And because oftentimes I am not reading this in advance, right? So a lot of times I move into that moment of silence and I'm thinking about the meditation and the application to myself. So I would like to become more mindful of enjoying that moment of silence with you. Okay. So if I ever move too fast, feel free to take longer. Pause, if I might suggest that. Just hit pause. And then when you're done with your moment of silence, come back to it and hit play. That's an easy solution. Okay. Now, this topic here, flexibility in relationships, I think is right on point, talking about how we're not naturally wired for flexibility. However, there are some codependent people, and they're codependent when they get here, and they go beyond being flexible. They have very few boundaries because they don't want to have conflict, pain, and rejection. They want to make sure that everything is okay. And they think that in order for everything to be okay, they need to have less to say. And so we're not talking about the two extremes. We're talking about being balanced. Oh, wow. This is a deep topic because the majority of people in life will experience fluctuating between being non flexible and being too flexible. But the thing that can help us to bring balance to it, to understand when to compromise, when to speak up for ourselves, to stand our ground, and when to respect the boundaries of others. The thing that helps us are the spiritual principles of the program. And not only just the spiritual principles of the program, because now it's talking about our emotional muscles become more flexible, right? With open-mindedness, willingness, honesty, empathy, tolerance sometimes, right? Not just the ability to live less rigidly, right? Let me go back to that thought. But the spiritual principles and the ability to apply them and become more flexible in our relationships come through relating, right? So it's not just the spiritual principles, but it's the application of them in our relationships, our willingness to engage people from the fellowship that have an understanding about how the disease of addiction can run riot in our own minds. They understand when we're squirrely. They understand when we're just standing real dogmatically on this one particular issue versus when we're not. They can relate to that. And so they have a tendency to be more accommodating for our good days and our bad days. The days where we perfectly apply these spiritual principles, and then days when we don't apply them at all. So it's not just the spiritual principles that help us, it's the ability to use them, apply them, to flex them, and learn how we individually work when it comes to being flexible in relationships. And again, the extremes are not the topic here. It does mention our extremes in the first paragraph. But today we're talking about recovery. We're talking about the ability to recover. And one of the most difficult things in our lives are going to be relationships. Basic text talks about relationships tend to be a huge stumbling block for us because we tend to place unrealistic expectations on ourselves and others. So, how wonderful is it to have a program that helps us to understand how to balance those expectations out so that we're not always losing relationships, but we're adjusting, being flexible, and making space or room for the quirkiness or uncomfortability of relationships through open mindedness, through willingness, through honesty, through empathy, through tolerance, through forgiveness, through faith, through goodwill, so that we don't always have to be in a position of losing relationships and losing ourselves. It truly is a work in progress. If you've been around any amount of time in this program or just in life in general, relationships are a work in progress. And how beautiful it is to have a relationship. Now, they're talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about that in other relationships with our sponsors, the people in the meetings, our home groups, right? Our job buddies, people we work with. I'm talking about all of these relationships, how beautiful it is to have relationships that give you room for error, but basically to grow. That's what we want. We want room to grow. I hope that this meditation has been helpful for you. I hope that you have a beautiful day on purpose. I'm looking forward to my day. So I know that my day is going to be a beautiful day. You take care. Talk to you soon.